Well, it was intense, but I lived through it, and I'd probably do it again. But I think I'd like to do it with more people, just like any geology tour. Let's get 15 guys and go traveling around, whatever. That'd be.
Yeah, but you need
look at these pictures. That's where I'd want to go, right there.
This is I mean, just to touch on it, I think this is where that starting to get that formulated. It'll make it even better. You start early, and then it. It'll materialize in a more harmonious way rather than 2 weeks beforehand.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But still, we got to go here, wherever this is. I don't know where this is.
Yeah, where is this?
Bulgaria? Yeah,
sounds great.
Really?
Let's go.
Yeah, I thought I had a link.
I mean, look at that.
Pretty wild, though, right?
Well, it looks like some of these things that I've mentioned about caves that I've seen, and they claim they're made by water and stuff like that, but there's not a single rounded stone in the whole friggin' thing. That's the part that gets me. It's like that cave in Vietnam, right. For example. It's like 3 miles long, and there's a forest inside of it, and you could literally fly an airplane through it. It's so friggin' big a cave, but
right.
It's on a fault line, so they think that water had seeped in the crack and expanded it, but there's not a round rock in the entire place.
Mm-hmm.
And where did all this rock go? I mean, did it fall to the bottom? And if it did should this be just covered and littered with debris? But it's not. It's things like that, and it makes you wonder, are you really thinking about this correctly? Did you really think it's made this way? Type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did water do that?
Did water do that? Yeah. Welcome to the October 2nd edition of The Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Dave, Jim, Heather, Buddy, Edwin, Robert Sr., Bruce, and our friend David Brown. After much catching up, we will be talking about how the electric paradigm can help answer some troubling enigmas, while Dave shows us his new electrical experiments. Please like and subscribe below.
Did you perchance see that thing that I think I sent it on the email from Brian Forster? Anybody?
No. I was still more caught up with what Jim sent me
I
there.
saw a little bit of it. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, but the way
it sounds like he's EU proponent, but he also doesn't know anything about it.
Right. It's like he is. I'm not sure there if he is or is not, but he doesn't talk about as in EU, but everything he touches upon, it's great examples of an EU explanation, more or less. So
right.
I see a lot of those in his work, yeah. I mean, if nothing else, he's dancing around the subject. I'm sure that him and Chris Dunn have had conversations about it. I mean, they must have, because, given what Chris Dunn has been talking about.
Yeah, and right now my mind is very much on Italy, but after a week or so from now, I'll reconnect with him.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a nice time.
Let's do that,
well.
and maybe we could... I know that Brian currently is in the middle of Egypt, so it's a little busy right now. But doing one of those tours.
I'd love to see him on the show. Who knows, in a couple of months, whatever.
Oh, I have some things to ask him.
Right?
I have some things to ask him straight up. I mean, after seeing what that next nasty guy said about, so I'm on Facebook, right? I follow this guy called Next Amnesty. I don't even know what his real name is, but him and his wife basically do tours, and they go talk about consciousness and whatever, and they go across the anyway, they were with Brian Forrester, and apparently Jim Maynard, Steve Maynard, something like that I think his name is, and that Steve Maynard guy apparently tried to punch him, and they got in a bit of a brawl in the middle of Egypt on a tour, and Brian Forrester was the tour guy, the guy running the tour officially, but he didn't bring him into the conversation. I learned about who it was through comment section. But anyway, so I know Brian was there, and and he went off on him, and for good reason it seemed, because if someone didn't want him to talk, and this guy was trying to do this, apparently Steve's into what's called chematology, and sort of have this idea that try to create an alternate Egyptian history. And you've probably seen him in one of those videos where he talks about the lights of Dendera, the snakes inside the glass thing on the walls. And I saw a few videos with him in it. And Chris Dunn, I think, was in videos with him. But he's apparently losing his fucking mind. And and I don't want to be bashing him because I really, don't know the truth. But, if you're going to get mad at someone to the point that you're an old man swinging fists at some guy who's 30 years old who has dreadlocks, I don't know what you're doing, but it's probably not the sanest thing in the world. Just saying.
No. Something must have triggered some emotional response there.
Well, apparently there was some sort of, there's always, every time this is some of the thing that we're talking about when we get into stuff like this, the EU will attract certain types of people. Some are going to be believers in certain things. Well, the same thing when every time you go into Egypt, you're going to have people who are going to propose their own ideas. And someone like the next guy, he's more of and I don't want to say hippie chill, he's more of a spiritual consciousness kind of guy, like meditate type of thing. And these guys were trying to sell books, apparently, the chematology books. So, it became commercial, versus not commercial. How do you make that balance?
This is one where it's one of the major Egyptologists underneath the auspices of the government conflicted with Graham Hancock.
This is Graham Hancock versus Hawass. I see Hawass there sitting down, and I see Graham
and they go at it. It's pretty wild. So.
Well, I don't trust anything that Egyptology dude. One of the things that I liked most about that Bright Insights fella and a few others that I see, ancient archaeology, technology or something, some other videos, they're fairly popular on YouTube. They get in this they basically point out how many times this bugger lies, this Hawass guy. Everything he's ever said, there's no things around the Sphinx, but you can see pictures. He finds pictures of Hawass going in these holes by the Sphinx. There's
that's very interesting.
Why are you denying these even exist? If
but he's almost
you can say they're short. Yeah. He's a character of he's. If I was to draw a picture of him, it would be a Sphinx itself sitting in front of a doorway. That's what he is. He's a friggin' gatekeeper. And that's exactly. And he won't open the door.
Yeah, right.
You will never figure out the riddle to get through.
You get into this kind of the rabbit hole of is he created to be that?
Well, and
this is why I like the work of Brian Forster so much. He is the next best thing for me besides actually visiting the places myself, right? Because
you're not allowed to go to half the things.
Well, but he does a great job of showing through the videos with quadcopters and whatnot. You get a great view, even better sometimes through the help of drones and stuff than I could ever have myself. And I can watch those videos. He doesn't put his ideas forward, except maybe, the idea this is ancient civilization, traces of high tech, and devastating event. That's the repeating mantra, if you will. And for the rest, he just points at the evidence and points at the evidence and points at the evidence.
And this is no different than Brian, no different than... they might have different conclusions. He mentioned Graham Hancock there, just mentioned Robert Bivol. And of course, we all know John Anthony West. Now, I'm not someone... I started, and I thank Graham Hancock for this. And for the exact same vein, I thank West and I thank Bivol. All three of them have showed me that history can be wrong. Now, it can't, and most likely is, because either you're misunderstanding the age and dating of rocks, or you're misunderstanding the age and significance of the civilizations. It seems to me.
Right.
And even if 1,000 years from now, if everything stopped working right here on the Earth and just ended, okay, just like there was no more human beings and no more technology, this thing was just left to its own devices of nature.
Right.
We wouldn't have, in 2,000 years, none of this glass would be here, none of this metal, none of the silicon. They would all be turned into crystallized rocks. I mean, they would just grow, over time. The things would grow off them. Metal would decompose, that type of thing, oxidate, And the only thing we'd really have left to claim, there would be a bunch of other people coming up and looking at the Hoover Dam wondering what the fuck it was. You wouldn't have a clue. You're like, well, it looked like it was blocking rivers.
The narrative gets built in order to get a certain sense of what that historical event was, and then the facts are built around that to support the narrative. I believe usually.
You're absolutely right. That is exactly the thing that pisses me off. When I read the mission statement for the Royal Egyptology Society from the 1850s or 1700s, I don't even know when exactly it was formed. The original mission statement was simply to purport the biblical version of events and to use Egypt to support the Bible. That's what his goal was.
Right.
So I don't know how much it's changed. So
the intention,
honesty.
Right. So what is that? This is manipulation.
You're basically, this is we made a propaganda art. That's all it is. Really,
yeah.
And so,
but then you extend it and you go, okay, I had 12 years of basically conditioning, that versus like expanding your consciousness.
Well, and let's be fair, they don't talk about Egypt a lot in school. I mean, so
I remember that was what I was fascinated with. It was like sixth grade. We had like a week of it, and that was it. It's like, I want more of that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to go to friggin'. I mean, I don't care about the Canadians who walked across this friggin' great land. I appreciate that they did, but I don't care. I know that a boat got lost, and I know that these people froze to death, and I know that these people did some crazy shit, and yeah, there was a Donner Party and all that stuff. Okay, sure, whatever. I had great times, I understand, but they've sugarcoated it so much. Trust me, if they did European history the way that they did American history, like imagine if American history was just for us, for what we study here, and American and Canadian, and Mexico, the whole friggin' thing. All of that history was just described in the same way as if it was done in Europe. Yes, these forces engaged these forces and took this land. These forces engaged these forces and took this land. And this country was founded, and these people rebelled, but we don't have that. It was just like, they gave up their land and went away to this little area in the middle of nowhere, and they called them Indians now, and they're in reserves.
There's generally tacit implication of like what the moral good was and what the moral right was, and that's where it's dangerous.
I like that European part, because they were like, he was a bastard from years here to here, and then a new king came in, and he was less of a bastard, but the guy over here became a prick. He married this bitch, and they went together and killed these people. There's no good or bad. They were just a bunch of bastards. It was Game of Thrones, but the same thing was happening all through.
You're doing it too there, though. I mean, we're all, we're not, by any means lily white in this situation, because you naturally do it. It's a natural
I just
process.
meant that the moral superiority.
Guys, these are bad guys,
Yeah, well, that's what I meant is that from certain periods of time, France was objectionably the bad guy, but from this point here, they were objectionably the good guy. People switch around, times change. That sort of recognition was part of I liked about European history. Over here, the European settlers were always in the right, and everything else was totally wrong.
I mean, that's because of associate. This is group association.
That's all I meant. No, obviously,
this is my team.
Well, yes, but I'm just saying Europe had to basically do that whole thing. Well, it was, we were doing good. I mean, the Dutch were in the biggest merchant fleet in the entire world for a while.
Were.
That's what I meant.
It was amazing.
But during those years,
they suffered. They suffered like a serious like. This is they found all the honey, and then they degenerated because they were drinking all the honey. Well, that's my understanding of it. I mean, just to a really high level.
I honestly don't know what ended Dutch dominance in that. I do know that we still
degeneracy.
I'm not a great historian or anything, nor a proponent or opponent or anything in history. It's just history for me, right?
Right.
But the dominance was lost mainly due to the dominance of the British Empire that became dominant overall, right? And we traded some colonies, we did a lot of fighting, a lot of wars, and that was all good back and forth until some royal marriage, like you exquisitely pointed out, Neil, there. And there was some marrying back and forth right? to save the Protestant crown in England, and that's when England became all powerful after that. And that's how we stopped fighting forever, I think. I don't think we ever fought ever again. Now, what did the Dutch do? They landed there, and they did deal with the local king. Yeah, so you make trade agreements, and you build local settlements for the trade stuff. And we went on trading, and we didn't care so much about the politics, and we didn't care so much about the conversion stuff. So the local rulers were more inclined to do business with us that way.
Well, that's
if you have enough guns, you just take what you want, right? It's another strategy. That's all.
Well, what I heard that they did, and I think that this plays into what you just said. I think, and I'm not obviously not a Dutch historian, but I found this to be brilliant. What they did is they mitigated the risk instead of trying to put the Dutch would everyone would sell shares in a and they would split the risk of a boat going somewhere, but the boats were also made to hold a lot of cargo. They weren't warships, and they were rugged. So one of the things that they basically did is, like, you would go to these Dutch merchants and say, "Yeah, I want to get places." They had they had deals with everyone to get their stuff places without being harassed. So instead of making warships that could also carry stuff, they just made. Basically, they were the first merchant marine ships, like carrying stuff from place to place. It was just a brilliant...
And they were well armored.
Yes. Like, you could take a few cannonballs, because they basically, all they had to do was make sure that he could get to shore before you could take him down, or get to another ship that could defend them, right? But anyway, but that insurance idea, or the risk splitting, was a big deal, and that's why we still calling people splitting our bill going Dutch. We would do that. So
the real decline, I think, was that all the spices and stuff that came from the Dutch East Indies, the prices went down because it became much more common. Other colonies in other places in the world, they moved all kinds of vegetables around. So we got the potato from America, for example, introduced in Europe. So we were, everybody was hauling back and forth all kinds of plants and animals and see if they can grow there. And,
right.
So that way you can, become your own market, or your own, the competitor of some other market or whatever. And
well, they no longer had that dominance. You're right. I mean, East Indies. Yeah.
And World War II changed everything, because after that, well, before that, it was already going on, but after that, decolonization was a rapid process, basically.
Yeah, I see that also feels like a trick to me. Like, it's like they walked over and said, "I get this great idea." Instead of making people, because they're really, just 100 years ago, they wanted to chop our heads off, right? Yeah, they did. They chopped off France's head, so we don't want to lose our heads, right? No, I don't want to lose my head. How about we do this? And they basically, for freedom. But they went and removed the idea of nobility and stuff, and sort of put these people on a back burner and put corporations on a forward burner. We can still exploit, but here's how we're going to do it. Great idea.
That whole idea of the corporation as an entity, that's a pretty profound...
Well, I think the best example of that would be the British Crown colonies, and I think Canada is still part of that. And one of the rules, if you will, if you join, because it's volunteering. But one of the things is the national language should at least also be English, right? That should be everybody should try and speak that, for example. That's one of the rules. So you have
here?
Yeah, so every country that is part of the British Crown, and there are like a dozen, they speak English, therefore.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we go on to this really awesome tales, by the way, Dave has joined us today. Dave.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Dave
thanks.
Brown
Thanks
there.
for tolerating our consciousness there, Dave. Yeah.
We're sorry. We basically got on and just started bitching at each other.
It's our way of
starting
everything.
I listen to you guys bitch every day, so it's okay.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, all right. Entertaining.
I love this platform, by the way. I think this show is probably the most.
That's a good people there.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
hang on. You have to repeat that. First of all, I really didn't hear well, and second of all, I think it was a compliment. So please, could you repeat that? I really didn't catch it.
I was just saying this is probably the best internet show that exists.
Why? Why? For what reason?
We study hyperbolic things too, so so that might be a little hyperbolic.
To me, the stories and the interaction is it's real. It's organic. It's it's true. And
it's kind of happened that way, so that's the beauty of it. So there wasn't a lot of like precognition. It just kind of happened. So
I love it.
We're going to have to control Robert here.
He got his picture.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, can you give your dad a call and tell him that he's screwed up the show?
Say something.
Neil has to do some more editing now.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much going to have to edit this whole part out. Yeah.
I can't just put my speaker on. Where's that at?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Turn your speaker on so you can hear us talking about you.
Do we have a good topic to talk about? Somebody going to contribute?
Well, I'd like to mention something.
Emma was great the other on Sunday. Really enjoyed her. So that was great.
Yeah, that seemed like a pretty good show. You guys were talking about it for a while.
Yeah. So thanks, Ito.
Sorry about that. I was up checking out the leaves changing. I was up in the car.
I was just happy. Sorry to interrupt there, Robert.
Oh,
I was just happy to.
Thursday.
Yeah, sometimes maybe a little bit delayed there. I was just happy to be the how do you say that, the middleman there,
well, you're Dutch.
There you go.
It just makes sense.
Well,
no,
despite all that, yeah. No, we're doing great. Little country, lots of people, doing pretty well.
No, it's just good that you facilitated that. Yes, I was very happy to have her on, especially because there are people who are interested in that sort of stuff, but how do they bridge that gap, to the EU? I mean, they see the similarities just as a flat, idea, but also we have to be careful that we don't, there's also coincidence versus causality and there's probably more than we don't even know. Like, I mean, we know that we can just change the frequency of EM waves and make like rats go nuts, so I'm positive that the way that our Earth works, in ways that we might not even notice, like we might not notice when the charge of the Earth has slightly changed because everything's based off of ground. And if ground is 0 and the charge of Earth went up, let's just imagine it went up by 0.01%, just a little bit. And it changed the waveforms across the entire planet for, say, a day. Well, would that affect living things on that planet? It seems to me that in the past, when big things have changed, it affects living living beings very powerfly, in the point where it could cause aphasia at the extreme cases, or of course, as we talked about before, hallucinations or delusions. Overt
based on
fear.
Our current reality.
Well,
anything away from our current reality would be a delusion.
No. I meant, like in the stories of Agamemnon talking to Hera, when that story would have been when the gods were quote unquote present in the sky, a la David Talbot. If that's the case, then the idea that gods were capricious, that could blow your city away with a thunderbolt and stuff, all of that, I mean, they had good reason to be scared of some of this stuff. So but how that affects the human mind, in the sense that, like before that, things seemed more advanced. It seemed like they were really advanced, and maybe at a different charge level, which might have made it easier to move rocks or whatever. And then things went chaotic for a time, where the gods were, it was not the heavenly order of the universe, Kronos above, everything being all perfect, yada, 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 to, hey, I'm going to screw her and I'm going to blow you away. And then I'm going to turn into a stag and do something over there. Like, what? Like, what's going on? This whole thing has changed, the sort of heavenly order was disturbed.
Here's a pretty good example of like different levels of consciousness, right?
I don't know if that's real, of course. I'm just
no, but yeah, I mean, just in experience, you can probably see that, right? Where it's like that's your main motivation is that versus like the higher motivations of like whatever, searching for truth, quote unquote. Yeah.
Well, we see this kind of stress all the time in people who work jobs that they don't like and do things that they, or they do things that they're afraid of and they have to do it. And we watch the psychic scars happen. So I can imagine what it must be like if everyone's screaming about bad things that could happen and also have happened.
You got to protect yourself, so it shuts down that inquiry. It's like my motivation is to survive.
Yeah, and I think that worshiping or being careful could come into that. Yeah, it's but we don't know. I mean,
I was looking.
We're so far removed.
I shared this with Ito last night, actually, but I'll share something really quick. And this is just my observation of something. And I've seen this image a number of times, and I like it. And it was something that I was going to incorporate into something I was doing, and like do my own version of it. So I was looking at. Okay, let's find a basic version of a cross section of the eye, right?
Right.
And it's like okay, so I start drawing it out. It's like yeah, I've seen this before, so let's draw it out. And I'm drawing it, and just basically tracing it, right?
Right.
And it's like what is this thing? This canal here,
I honestly don't know what it is.
And it's like, but it's in anatomy things. It's like, I got this far in the drawing, and it's like, it kind of struck me. It's like, what is this thing, right?
It's your plasma focus device.
Yeah, right. It's actually the hyaloid canal that runs between, the center of the lens down to the.
I had no idea that was
nerve.
even there.
I had no idea it was there. And it's like, holy cow. And it's like, and all of a sudden the eyeball becomes a torus, right? And it's like,
you blew my mind just looking at that. Because, the bottom of the torus is where all the energy comes out at. Right. And it enters in from the other side.
And I just stumbled across it, because I like this image. I like that image, because it's got like, metaphor to it. But that's, anyway, here's education for me. It's like, I didn't know about that thing,
Yeah. It's almost like the vagus nerve that connects the gut to the brain.
Well, yeah,
but it's like, but then what's the function of it? And then you start thinking about frequency. with all our looking at things, it's like, okay, here's our perception of light. I got the rods and the cones. What's the function of this? And the way that it's presented in the literature is, well, it's lymph. It balances pressure, right? And it's like, okay, well, does it possibly do something else? So,
well, that's right. You've nailed it. Something very bothers me greatly is when I deal with someone who claims that something. It's like writing, like we talked about before with regards to geology. This is a fault line. Just it is. They're giving their assumption in the description. And we don't really know what it does.
I gotta get this. I'm gonna take it.
All right. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Rob, what's going on?
Yeah, let's throw it. You gotta get to 7. We can do the 7, right?
He's gone. He's not. I might keep that just for
I swear, I've tried to tell him 20 fucking times how to use his Skype. It's to the point where he just won't even listen to me. He thinks he knows it. So I just gave up. I'm done trying to help him.
There's great comedy in that.
It's a fucking Greek tragedy.
You know what's crazy is that we can hear him. Everything's perfect.
I know. That's the point.
He just needs to find out where the sound is coming from and turn the speakers on.
He has no idea how to use his fucking machines. And it's like, I try to tell him, and then he just stares at the wall. It's like he won't even pretend to listen.
By the way, it's a frequency response thing. It's like how you can you have an ability to tune into something. The attention isn't in the window of being able to tune into it. to get it to work. And this is our like little bandwidth of it varies for everyone, obviously. But often when you're not exposed to it, that window isn't the working window is inaccessible, because they want to go fast, and the trick is go slow. The trick is to go slow with it, and it's like the perception of computers, etc. Oh, it's fast. You got to get blah, blah, blah. We get a lot of anxiety, and then there's the crash burn.
Yeah, actually, I can see that. I recognize that some things are. Definitely, you need to take it slow. My mother used to be someone I had to. She got much better, believe it or not, when I introduced her to video games. Like my mother was actually bored of, and this was years ago, probably 10 years ago or something now, and at that point she was just trying to get into computers, and I had to write down like step 1, do this, step 2, do that type thing, and then. Now she's to the point where she doesn't ask for help or anything, and she has complete access to the internet now, so everything's fine that way. But one of the things that I did is like you probably should enjoy this a bit more. And she was like, "Well, I just watch TV here, and I don't really want to do that. I go and do this, and she tell me her things. I go, well, you should probably just get a PlayStation then." And she's like, "What?" And I go, "Here, play Resident Evil." And that's the first thing I got my mother to play, and she was loving it. So, she reads books like that. Like, horror, Stephen King novels don't really faze her, fantasy novels, whatever. So this was like, she was like, "Oh, this is amazing," and she's learning like how the controls work. And then I explained to her, you can go online and if you get stuck, you can just, like, for example, just search something like this. And I showed her how to use Google in the sense of like Resident Evil problem, and sometime or can't solve or whatever. And here's the puzzle, and there'll be someone who knows how to solve it. I mean, my dad used to be amazed by the Rubik's Cube until I was like, "Dad, here's Google and here's YouTube. Here's how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Here's a guy solving one Rubik's Cube in each hand, and he did them both in less than 17 seconds." So, and he's like, he was proud when he could finish 3 sides. He was like, "Look what I could do." This is way back when they came out.
That's demoralizing, though, too. You see someone who could do that, right?
Well, no, but he was like, "I want to learn something like that." And I go, "Well, how about something like how to solve a Rubik's Cube?" And he was like, "Well, yeah, that's really hard." I go, "Here's an answer for you. And you can do the same thing with your tractor." He was like, "What?" I go, "Watch. John Deere tractor, blah, 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 transmission problem here." And it's like, here's 15 pages on that subject. He's like, "What?" Yeah, people are using it for everything now because, they need answers, and people want solutions to simple problems that should be simple.
Yeah, this is an example of they just released this. This is I don't know if you're familiar with Rhino at all. Rhino is a pretty high end modeling system that's traditionally on a PC, but here they've just released it. It's a Mindscape or something, but for VR, and you can kind of see it becomes a very much more intuitive way of modeling things. And I of course want it immediately, to be able to do this.
It looks like AutoCAD, but not.
It's basically AutoCAD in VR, but using Rhino. Yeah. So here's where we are, which is a beautiful thing, where it goes from that kind of intimidation factor to like, okay, here's a tactile way of doing it, and there's a significant different approach that happens, here. So
here comes Bruce.
Okay, it's Bruce. All right,
you're gonna have to call him.
I got him. Yeah, got him from the other
side. I missed that feature. Just add
Did
someone
anyone
to
try
call.
Calling Jacob Gable as well?
Oh, okay. I think I have him on here because that was the one that I missed. So if
I'm talking to David Brown because he's been trying to get on the show for a while. Number one, congratulations, David.
I just got off with the senior on the phone. He's got Bruce Laborn in the house, and I think that was Bruce that was trying to talk.
I think we just called him, so hopefully he's on. Yeah.
I heard it on the phone. You were calling him, so that's why I got off the phone.
Okay.
So wait. Dave just got married, right?
Yes, congratulations, David. I forgot to say that.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right.
So that was
2 weeks ago or something?
No, that was a Facebook faux pas there.
What?
Oh.
We've been together 10 years. We got 2 kids.
Oh, okay. Well, then congratulations on 10 years.
Hey, thanks. You got to still send me a toaster, though.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. One toaster.
I'll give you the one I got from the bank.
All right, that works for me.
Mine will be a Cylon.
I like the violin
because they're called toasters.
The violin is a nice. Are you a violinist?
That is my wife's, and she is attempting to be. She started with bass, and now she's playing guitar. When I first met her, I was DJing, so
very cool.
She'd done a little MCing and some music production before then. So
okay, nice.
A lot of fiddling up this way too.
A lot of fiddling. We need to get you a banjo.
Oh, I don't think I could deal with anything like that. Oh my God, can you imagine? In a few years, you can imagine me getting grayer and sitting there on the front porch right there.
You can play the banjo, and I'll grab some spoons.
DJ David Brown.
There you go.
Let's see. I have some photos I was going to share with you guys.
Sure.
Last night, but I am pulling them up here.
Well, you do that, but I wanted to mention one more thing that I think is important that Jim turned me on to, and I just found out about it like just moments before Jim sent me the email. But his action pretty much confirmed, and I went looking, and it's on the Thunderbolt site and their Patreon thing that Dave Talbot did have a stroke.
Oh, right. I heard about that. Yeah.
So
that's a shame.
Yeah. But they're not nearly as lethal as they used to be. And my father is walking around and still a little weak on one side of his body, but everything else has come back. He's a little bit mentally different after a stroke. Like he likes reading instead of watching TV, which is odd. Things like that.
Well, but, it might have been a positive.
Well, here you go. He still has my books, goddammit. Anyway, so yeah, Dave, Dave had this thing there, but he's recovering now. So
where is he located? I mean, just out of curiosity.
I honestly don't know.
He's in the States?
Yeah, he's in the States for sure.
Okay.
Isn't he in Dallas?
Who? Talbot?
Yeah, David Talbot.
I thought they were talking about you. I'm sorry.
No. I think he's in Portland.
Portland?
Portland is, yeah.
Oh.
I believe Talbot's in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, that's right. He's in Portland.
Okay.
Just one of those things.
I hope he gets better too.
Well, that's the thing. Getting over it, and it becomes hard to walk and stuff. He's going to be through physical therapy for a while, but it's not the death sentence that it used to be, or not. I shouldn't even say it that way. Not even as crippling as it used to be, because you can, if you get to it within a while, you can. And there's actually no physical damage inside of the brain. They give you this super anticoagulant that basically scrubs your veins pretty much, and loose basically opens up all your blood vessels, and so it usually gets rid of the blockage. And if that's the case, then your recovery is like I said, my father can drive again, but he still can't drive a motorcycle or a snowmobile because he's just not strong enough on one side of his body. But
okay.
So I'm just saying it. I wish him all the best, but I'm concerned. But I'm sure that he can be okay. I think he has to be. He just has to be.
Right. So Dave, you have something you'd like to share with us?
Here, I'm just popping them in there. I don't know if you can see that very well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
This is something I made last night. I haven't uploaded a video yet, but I attached a quartz crystal to the electrode on top, and then just put a clay ball on the top of it. And
hey, Bruce.
Okay.
Looks like an astronaut.
We got Bruce now.
So you got so this is your it's you said a piece of crystal with clay on top, and it turned to rock, is what you're saying?
No. Yeah, here, let me see if I can get another photo here. On the electrode, you can see in the background.
Yeah.
the clay ball, and I stuck a natural quartz crystal, terminated quartz crystal, to the electrode, and it's being held in place by a wet clay ball.
Oh, okay.
And then on the other electrode on the bottom, I just put this bit, attached it to the electrode, and another wet clay ball on top, and was discharging through the quartz crystal, arcing to this ball. Oh. And I did it for, let's say, 5 minutes. And there was definitely some focal points I was seeing in the plasma or the arc discharge. And this is the shape it left. It was a perfect ball started.
Oh, and, so it ate away little craters. Wow. It looks like an asteroid. Yeah.
And that's exactly my wife and I looked at it, and that's exactly what we thought. Ryugo, there's a asteroid lately that looked just like it.
You know that pattern that you see, if you zoom into that again and you look at the pattern on the right side, how it looks like scalloping. Well, no, they're just scalloping all along the edge, like little pits were either blown out or ripped out. And you see that all across. If you zoom into that perfectly smooth northern face of Mars, for example, the lowest part.
It's like hexagons to me in some of these.
Yeah, actually, they might be. They might be hexagons. I wasn't arguing that, but that scalloping effect is a real good EMD indicator. But I don't know if the clay was wet or if it was blowing things out. So, you got to be careful. But definitely, I would say that's Phobos on a drill bit right there.
Just in relation to this, Thunderbolts posted a thing on Facebook today, linking to the article that also has a linkage to the latest video the Japanese have of this asteroid, and definitely not a dirty snowball there.
Yeah,
and it looks kind of like the residue of a big smelter oven or something. It's like dark. Leftover cooked material, utterly burned. That's what it looks like.
I saw some of the pictures, but I kind of couldn't find an album yet, so I kind of was like, I don't want to just look at 3 pictures and consider this a day. I want to see like all the raw footage. Like, give me everything from the time it just about touched down to the time where it ran out of power, and then I'll look at all of them. Because I just want to see the publication views are always going to be the 1 or 2 little things, so unless they're really amazing. They sent 2 right at the same time?
I think so. Yeah, 2 tumbling things, I think.
That's pretty cool. I like the idea. We'll send 2. If one doesn't, if the other one smashes in, the other one will still be there to film the other one smash. It'll be great.
So, Dave, could you explain the experiment again?
This particular one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with this, I've had the idea of, I've been playing around with, just, 2 bare wires, adding different, things to the electrodes. I used some clay, some really rough clay. And then yesterday I went out and bought some actual modeling clay that you'd make pottery out of. So it's a really smooth clay. It's the first time I've used that very pure modeling clay is this. And this is what I did. It's actually early this morning. I stayed up really late. But this is the last thing I did. So this a clay ball just sitting on top of this metal bit, which is just sitting on top of an electrode. And I have an electrode at the top, which is connected to a the quartz crystal. Again, I thought that it would be some sort of semiconductor. It didn't work so well until I put some clay on the outer edge. I think it's really just conducting through the clay, not the actual crystal itself. However, it does provide a very fine point that as soon as I can get these other photos to show up, I was able to get some really good shots of, I want to say a burst current, but you can clearly see the helical spin of discharge coming off.
Really? Yeah. So what kind of voltage, what kind of potential are you putting across? Currents are you getting?
Sure, it's a 3,000 volt neon power supply that I just ordered off the net, found the cheapest thing I could find, and just wired that up to a switch, and I'm just running two leads off of this. It's like a solid state neon transfer. It's not like anything else I've seen. I want to say that there's some sort of voltage protection in there, so I'm not sure I'm getting what I...
Actually, it has current protection.
Yeah, it's got some sort of current protection in there. I noticed that sometimes I have to reset the power to get it to turn back on. So Yeah, which is actually good because I made a really dumb mistake the other day and touched it and fried the tip of my finger.
Yeah.
Well,
oh damn!
Remember, I know that. What was his name there? Greg was not happy that I was constantly saying, but I was like, no, be safe. This is salt. Like, like it turns into chlorine gas. Chlorine gas is not toxic. What are you talking about? No, it's only an irritant. I go, it's only an irritant, and if you're confined in a room with it, it'll kill you. Yeah. I go, that's the definition of toxic, though. Like, I understand that you can live through it, but come on.
Well, and I was sitting there recording as I was frying that salt, and there was that gas coming off, and I'm just sitting there filming it. So it is true. I was not using very safe standards.
Oh well, no. You're not. I'm not. I mean, I don't think that anyone it's rare that you're going to do something that's going to kill you unless you abuse your electrics there. Like, don't start touching things while it's on, like I said, make sure that you can do everything and then just turn the switch on and then watch it go and don't touch anything and then go turn it off and then touch stuff again. Like, that alone can save you. So that you're your best defense basically in safety when it comes to stuff like that. Cause I mean, you're tempted to go and stick your finger in there and go, oh, I'm just going to poke this and then no, don't poke that, but you're right. It does have, there's current protection in most neon sign transformers. When you have unlimited, current, that's, for example, what was his name there? CJ Ransom, had ran Vemisat Laboratories and, had 75 to 125,000 volts potential, and that's when he was making the Martian blueberries. He was just making all of these, and I have a couple of them actually. He gave me one, but they're little black balls, not more than maybe half a centimeter across or so, and 40% of them were hollow, and so it's very much like welding slag. And he was making this out of dirt, so he was just basically frying dirt, and it was making these spheres. So, but that's a higher potential that you're at. And, so you're going to get different effects depending on, the variables, I guess.
Power. I definitely want more power.
Yeah. I definitely want more power. Yeah.
I've gone back and I used to watch all the Billy Elverton experiments, and I think that's what got me into the electric universe geology. Him and Michael Steinbach was the two primary guys.
They're fantastic.
Seeing that happen and seeing mesas being built and just all of these weird formations using electricity really made me think, what is it that we don't know, that we haven't tried, that I just don't understand why scientists or people in general don't think about electricity the way that guys like Tesla used to do back then. It seems like we got to the standard where everybody has their devices, and we believe everything that we're taught, but it feels like something isn't right. I try to have this electric universe conversation with my friends, and they're ignoring the lightning in the sky. They're ignoring the static electricity coming off their finger as they're walking over to shake my hand. And you try to have a conversation about what's powering our bodies, how do we interact with each other. The magic question, what is the meaning of life? And how are we?
What is life itself? Yeah.
What is consciousness?
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, it's, I think I said this before, an electric shock can stop your heart, and it can also bring it back to life. So to me, it's the spirit.
What's the connection? Yeah, exactly.
Is that electricity?
And it's, I was in that industry actually, and it's like the mechanistic aspect of it. It is soul crushing. I was in it for 7 years and I had to get out of it because it's just so mechanistic. And then using our standard model of electrical engineering, and it's like you're saying electrophysiology is the same as the mechanical model, and it clearly isn't. It's obvious that it's not.
No, and
they just keep going. Because dollar bills.
Dollar bills. Dollar bills, y'all. But no, there was this gentleman who, I'm not going to say he's a troll, but he came on asking, so what are the mathematics for this EU? Tell me more about the electric universe and stuff like that, and what are the mathematical models? And in so doing, and it took him a while for him to sink in. It goes Maxwell's equations. That's it. You don't need to go much further than that. It's not understanding how these factor in with other things like passing through. Like normally you would say that
they're not purely dogmatic. I mean, it's like this was his exploration, and this is as far as he got. By the way, and it's like, and there's things in this video. There's a mention of things that Maxwell discussed about space. And other energy, and he's discussed. Yes. He references Maxwell in it, and it's not our standard.
There is more to what
dielectric model.
There's more to what you're saying than let on. Same with Newton, as right. You can go into, and he had different ideas too. But the essence of what I meant was that it's like give him as much credit as you give Newton. Like, if that's all you have to do, and put that into context, will give you the basis of the electric universe in a nutshell. You don't need to actually go further than that.
There's a lot that no one knows, like Hamilton. Who knows about him? No one knows about him. The discoverer of a quaternion, and then who knows what a quaternion is? Not many people. But it's usually important. By the way, it didn't get exposed. It's a way of representing a rotation that doesn't have gimbal lock on it. And it uses instead of imaginary numbers where there's a real component and a imaginary component, there's 3 imaginary components. And then if you start looking at it,
is this like the principle of a differential?
Well,
I'm just wondering.
Very similar. Yeah.
Okay, because that's obviously I think about things like that. So.
Right. But they kind of come out of. I mean, this is where these things kind of populate out, and they become the cornerstone. They're cornerstone in the animation industry for sure. But no one knows about them. And it's like Steve Jobs and Wozniak, but these characters weren't like foundational. It's Kernighan and Ritchie, and those are the guys, but no one knows Newth. No one knows them. But those are the guys that actually were the foundational kind of light bulbs. So this is kind of the reality that you kind of run across as you dive in a little deeper.
Well, I was, and to be fair, I wasn't trying to say that Newton's equation, Newton's or Maxwell's or Einstein's, whatever, are the end result, be all to anything. But
they become dogmatic. They become dogmatic poles of like the dispensation of truth, and I find it really bothersome.
Well, what I find is that most of the things, however, are derivations of their work. For example, we might not talk about, like you would say, oh, well, aluminum's not magnetic. Well, no, but if you have a moving magnetic field, you can hover aluminum. Mm-hmm. You can do copper spinning is very diamagnetic. You can do crazy things with that. But what are the laws that go in? How does this work? Where is the resistances? What is the load? Once you start thinking in practical terms, you can understand certain things. Like when you magnetically levitate a frog, most people wouldn't understand that you're actually causing heat to build up inside the frog because the frog has resist through its own atoms, the downward motion of the gravity, which is a force. And it's applying this many newtons.
But it survives.
Well, I wasn't saying it wasn't going to survive, but what I meant was,
but
understanding that principle.
It's not for steam. It's not for steam. It's another action.
No, yeah, it's inside the cells. All the cells are causing a dielectric response, a diamagnetic response. It's because everything is diamagnetic to some degree, pretty much. I mean, everything relatively not ferromagnetic or paramagnetic, though, but most things, like from water to bismuth to and if water is diamagnetic, then your body is pretty much. So, that's, anyway, I'm just giving you that example of how that technically all of that crap that I just described, even though Maxwell didn't even once think about it, are from his equations if we understand and put them into the understanding of, and then put them into Lenz's law and so forth, and you can start understanding. That's all.
But all these names of, and I'm familiar with them, by the way. But it's like all these names of things are very, very hard-edged boxes that there's a flow between them, and ultimately there's a missing piece because, as Dave said, it doesn't tie in to the electrical system of life.
Well, that's where we get into the idea of what we were just describing. If there are different frequencies or different charge levels, how does it affect biology? We know that if all things being equal, they're going to charged particles are going to obey the laws of Maxwell, generally speaking. However, when you start putting them into frequencies and harmonies and relationships and charge balances, all of that would make just those rules those 4 basic rules so goddamn complex. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Exactly. That's what I meant.
Like when you're fishing, it becomes a bird's nest on the reel, right? I mean, that's ultimately what happens, right? Well, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Neil, you just made me think of something.
Sure.
You were asking what happens if charge changes on the Earth, even for a day, right? And before that, you were talking about safety, doing these experiments, and I'm about to mix the two. Part of what you were explaining being safe was to have a grounding mat and to wear thick rubber shoes, right?
Yes. Just to prevent you from becoming a conduit. That's all.
Okay.
And one of my other things that my professor always said, just to throw it out there, is that whenever I'm playing with electronics, or whenever he's working on a circuit, he always puts one hand in his pocket. Because if you have one hand in your pocket, you can only poke with one hand, and then it has to pass through you, down to the floor to your shoes to get through that. And if you're standing on a static mat or something, you're generally safe because there's no path to ground. If you have two hands out, you may cause a shock to go across your body, type of thing. That's all. Anyway, continue, please.
So with that thought, I was just thinking of modern society. Back in the day, people used to not wear shoes, and now people always wear shoes. And there's some sort of feeling I get when I go outside and I don't have shoes and socks on, and I go stand on the grass, stand on the earth. It physically feels great to me, and I come back and I feel recharged.
Earthing, it's called, actually. There's a term for
it. So that right there, you imagine, okay, what if there is this change on the earth? How does it affect people? Well, how are we affecting ourselves right now with our modern dress and I guess separating ourselves even with our normal dress of shoes? And then add to that.
I think about that a lot, actually.
So we have these electronic devices in our pocket that's transmitting these frequencies, which again is only going to get more and more intense as 5G rolls out and all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, as the FCC has lifted all these, there were regulations on how much radiation could be in the air. They've lifted all this, where it's and once again, dollar bills, So, but what's the effect? And it's like, my gut feel is that they don't care, or even worse, it's like, let's fry everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, we all watched Johnny Mnemonic.
I think they care more about the money.
It's not about the money. It's about the money.
Yeah.
Well, what if, okay, and I think I got this from one of the past electric views. You guys were talking about the pyramids and why did they wrap up the mummies and why were all their insides removed, right? We think that, at least what I remember watching the history show is, they removed the brains and did all of these things and then wrapped up the mummy, and the mummy was preserved this whole time. But if the pyramid was something in a different charged environment, if the planet did have a much different atmosphere with a different charge, and they were using those as some sort of generator, what if when things went wrong, people just got fried, and the royal ones that they found the bodies, they wrapped them up? To me, they look kind of like fried bodies, and this came up. I visited Colorado a couple months ago and went up to Pikes Peak, and then I heard shortly after that. I think actually it was within a week. I came back across one of Tesla's writings, and it was about his experiment in Colorado, and Colorado Springs, where he went up on one of those mountains there, and he chose that location because it was one of the most electrified, the most lightning discharge places in America. And he built this shack, or had a shack, and used a bathtub full of salt water that he used as a giant capacitor. And he made some sort of arrays with those, and was able to get standing lightning to discharge, and it turned off the whole city power. And reading that article and doing some research, I came across the what do they call it? It's basically the animals that just get gutted and half their face is missing and their skin is just seared clean off, but it's in certain sections to where their insides are removed. And to me, it just seems like a giant lightning storm comes through there, discharges to these animals, and just vaporizes their internals. It's making me think about how much do we really not know about our atmosphere, or what is just the majority of people not knowing.
Right. And how it relates, once again. I mean, you start pushing, instead of our materialistic view, you start looking at the ecosystem as a living thing, and then you want to take the next step, and then a conscious living thing, and the sun, what's the role of that? This is high heresy, of course, in academia, and you will be thrown out immediately, if you start promulgating this idea too strongly, Well, but it seems to me that it's kind of a natural step, and I think that previous cultures believed it pretty strongly.
Yeah. Well, I like to lean towards anything. There's something about reading what the ancients wrote and reading it with a different set of eyes and reading everything as they were written in parables.
Right.
Because it just doesn't make sense compared to what we're led to believe on these days.
It's very limited. I mean, and it's particularly obnoxious because it's promulgated as the apex of human achievement, where it seems to me that it's the nadir,
We know it all.
We know, and please, everyone else is primitive, and blah blah blah, and it's like you turn that upside down, and all of a sudden all the little charms come out and start sparkling, which is fun.
That's something that hasn't escaped me. There's clear evidence that some pyramids do appear to have been blown to pieces. Others are, let's just say, crappier pyramids. But those are the Egyptian ones. If you start exploring around the entire world, how old these objects are, and some of them contain like mica in them, which is a good electrical insulator, separating the top of the pyramid from the bottom. Why would you do that? Things electrically separating. And the same thing is with, why did you use these stones on a pyramid casing? These ones hold charge, these ones don't. You're connected to an aquifer, that type of thing. And then, of course, we could go further. Is this just an extension of the idea of hills that were struck by lightning after rainstorms or something? And they saw the effect. Are they trying to use these perhaps maybe for tuning? Do they have frequencies involved, different harmonics, beneficial? They seem, in their writings, to treat certain things divinely, which we don't now. And perhaps maybe this, the divine energies and what they thought was souls and stuff like that. Because, I mean, there's no doubt that if you saw a little wisp traveling up into the heavens, going up the world tree or whatever, you would think, oh, well, that's his spirit. The guy that just died here in that little thing that we're doing, that's his spirit going up right there. Oh, I believe you. I totally do. I saw it, actually,
Right.
They're going to talk about that.
This is ultimately, there are, surprisingly, from someone who I have quite a bit of respect for, looking at this thing as, and they've talked about it, but it's, this is actually a heterodyne for it's a spirit catcher. It's a dream catcher. It's about consciousness.
Well, I certainly do not know.
Modeling that geometrically, pretty interesting.
I do know
endeavor,
that little thing they call the Thieves' Tunnel. There, if you scroll up a little bit, you were looking at it there in the picture. Well, I mean, just talking to Chris Dunn, we obviously questioned the idea of those being relieving blocks. So you can see that they've changed certain things over time, and there's weird things. But that Thieves Tunnel right there, when I learned that didn't have to be there, what was the chances of them burrowing in directly to that corner where the three meet, and learning that they were probably did something to get something out of the pyramid because it couldn't make that turn? Couldn't make that 90-degree turn. It was too long. So they cut a hole and took him out through there. Now that makes a lot more sense. And when I heard that theory, I was like, huh. You know, like, you wonder what was really going, because I mean, these people have been going into this thing for thousands of years. You know, I mean, it was open except for that grand gallery part wasn't open. They didn't know how to get into there. Till that was fairly recent when they started taking out the granite plugs, and recent by like I don't know, like 1,000 years ago. So recent.
Hey Neil, pull up. I sent you some photos in the messenger portion.
Actually, that's Dave.
That's me. Yeah, I'm doing it. Okay. Yeah, it's cool.
He's driving.
I'm driving today.
The actual arcing.
Oh, cool.
Hey.
Okay.
Is that a dual arc?
Nice.
So this is what's making me think about the whole pyramid thing. I saw somebody else that built a pyramid, and it's basically a plasma ball and a pyramid, and they were able to get some different types of it's like I guess a plasma diactron, you know, instability where it's separating into kind of like a pearl of strings per se.
Yeah.
So getting this point, using this quartz crystal gave me this nice little, you know, helical discharge here, which I wasn't getting just from using a clay ball. It was just a random arc, more like a lightning pattern. So I'm wanting to do some more tests, and I was thinking, here's my first thing. You know, salt as a conductor of some sort. I was thinking of making a clay ball and hollowing out the middle and putting in salt water. Or
twisted filaments.
You know, trying something with different shapes, like a pyramid shape. You know, not just a four-sided pyramid, but the eight-sided with the inners going in to see how does it collect or discharge differently. I don't know that it's even going to be effective with this low of a voltage, but
right.
Yeah, I love seeing the little cross your fingers thing, the two lightning bolts crossing, and we make that symbol with our fingers as a sign of good luck. I love that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That's what we do.
Or if you're lying,
Twisted filaments.
But well, I could just envision that someone saw it in the sky and was like, "Oh, that's a good sign."
Yeah. But I mean, you could see the helicity in it, right?
One of the things that has hit me, Dave, if you want me to think about this electrically speaking on regards to pyramids, with the amount of pressure that you could probably build up in some of these things and what they were probably doing, it looks like Chris Dunn was probably right that they were in some way trying to create a chemical reaction because of, you know, the crystals on the walls and so forth. And this was something that would increase pressure. Now, when I looked at and I didn't understand that, like, made no sense to me at first. In fact, until probably a week after I was done talking to Chris Dunn, I started thinking about this a bit more. One of the things that hit me was in the Serapeum, I think it's called, there's these large they're called bull sarcophaguses, and they thought they were the resting place of royal bulls because they found a few ox bones inside. Now, the thing is that by watching this video, this gentleman had purported that what they really were doing, they were creating an airtight cylinder box, this sarcophagus, and he proved it with some old photos when these things were first discovered, showing additional rocks put on top of them, you know, for extra weight, you know, to hold this down, this cover down, and this cover is like 30 tons. So the amount of pressure that would be building if you put you know, hops in there and meat, and the bacteria growth will create such gas pressure as to make these things probably glow with piezoelectric pressure, and because it's causing a bend in the structure very slightly, but that is bending all the crystals, and the crystals, of course, create a positive focus there. Now, it didn't really strike me as something that made sense there either. Why would they do that? But then I realized what Chris was saying. He was saying they were basically creating a chemical reaction inside the pyramid and creating high pressures, possibly. If they're doing this, they're creating that entire structure would basically have an outside that's negative and an inner positive core that would just be friggin' glowing. Now, that's definitely something that would be considered a capacitor. Probably that's why the King's Chamber is in the middle, perhaps, maybe. I don't know. But this type of thing, this type of idea, and then perhaps tuning it, stuff like that, I see these as more as electrical machines the more I look at them. In fact, it's almost hard to deny. What were they doing? Were these things built for specific effects? Not just because it looks like these ones were built for power, but before that, some of them looked like there was so much energy in the air that you could basically impress people with your magical powers, like a tempest. I can call lightning down, which by the way is exactly what a holocaust is in the Bible, in the old, Isaac, Abraham type era, where they would make an offering to God by and putting it up on a high mountain and then pouring water on it, and then God would come down and consume it, which is what would happen. You were just talking about what would happen if it's on top of a mountain, and what Tesla was doing, So I think of things like this, and obviously this belies an idea that perhaps maybe in the past things were more energetic. And
Neil, to that same point, you asked, what if we had a change in the electric potential of the Earth? If the Earth was in a different location and the skies were different, just like all of the old ancient writings say, before the fall of Adam, before all of these disasters happened on Earth, where it was the golden age, where there was no problems, people didn't fight each other, they weren't trying to survive. And I think of the old scriptural stories of like the curse of Cain or the curse of Ham, where God changed the color of certain peoples, right? And to me, I look at the geographical areas of the planet. As Neil likes to say, trolling Google Earth. Right. You can visually see if there was a giant storm system like this arcing pattern that I'm showing you that was traversing the planet with some incredible discharge. Certain areas of the planet would be affected by electricity, changing the molecular structure of people and like their melanin in their skin. Why are there so many variations of different tints and melanin levels in people's skin? There are features, but again, in certain areas of the world, certain people have the same features. And then as we start to intertwine and mix our races together, I don't like the word race, by the way, but
I understand.
Mixing different types of people from different areas of the world together, we're starting to look more like one complete person. And I can say that because I've got mixed babies.
We're also inside a lot more, but when the idea of this has not escaped me. If there was no blue in the name in ancient Greece till about 1400 BC or something, then they started having the word blue. Things like the seas were called wine dark. Things apparently had, in just looking at it, we've had discussion before, I'm not going to go into it too much, but about if there was a red tint or a purple-ish hue to the sky or something like that has caused our, after the times of catastrophe, we'll say, that over even a few generations, all of us would become generally uniform in color again, generally speaking. We'd start over time because we're only this color because of where we live, and over time we've changed and adapted to the area that we're in. And you can see this from all over. I mean, people traveled and you can see how they've set up new adaptations. The Inuit are pretty much the same as the Japanese, but they look somewhat similar, but that's it now. I mean, they've lived in the Arctic for so long that they are they're pale and they have, thick, they have fat reserves. They have the ability to work without gloves in like negative 50 degrees, because unlike other times, their blood vessels will keep going through and pumping heat to their hands. I had no idea. I was like, what? Yeah. So little things like that can change. And I can't even talk about human origins, because now it goes back so far. I really have to question, just by the evidence I've seen so far.
Well, once again, it's often agenda. It's often agenda driven. Here's the narrative we want, and let's produce the facts.
Yeah, support that's true too. So. But let's just envision this over time and being exposed to a nearby arc blast hit. It can change you. Absorbing that kind of radiation could have an effect on you or your children. And that's just, if that's regional, but on the long term, could you imagine that everyone was generally very similar, and then suddenly we started getting colors again because, we had to deal with the sun at a full intensity, didn't have uniform weather from the wonderful Saturn thing in the sky. I can envision strange things and how we would interpret those. So I don't know about the, basically it just opens up more questions, but it also can help understand why it didn't happen as much.
Get back to what Tesla was talking about, what Dave was mentioning. It's that video. It's on the page today. It's like right around 42 minutes, but he's talking about what the circuit was, and it's a grounding, and ultimately they had like a virtual ground, and the entire circuit was based on the variation of the potential of what we would consider ground.
Are we talking about like him shutting down that town?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not that one. There's another one. Where it's the Marconi Tesla experiment that they were doing. It's out here actually. So, but I mean, that's what he's talking about there. But it's a similar idea,
right?
Where they're using instead of using okay, here's the inductor with the two. We're going to ground it, and then it's because there's a reference. It's like, okay, part of the circuit is actually the Earth, and it's part of the variation of the ground is what we're going to ride on.
That's actually what we do. Literally, is put the for a power grid or something. We are grounding ourselves to the Earth, and the change of potential across ground, like a telluric current or whatever, will create an imbalance. If that is imbalanced to a certain degree, alarms will be tripped and things will go off, because that's not supposed to happen. And this is one of the things that makes us talk about the potential devastation of such things as a Carrington event. So we have a whole whack of charged particles suddenly blast across the Earth. The ionosphere shrinks and wobbles. Charges are induced across the Earth. Potentials that go across lines of discord or crustal discontinuities and river systems and so forth. And now half of a power grid could be 3,000 volts higher than the other half, because this planet is more charged, and this part of the planet is more charged and unable to bleed charge correctly across it evenly. So now, boom, we have this disparity, and and plus all the power grids themselves would be inducing currents, because they are technically, if you make a circuit and there's a loop going across that, a bunch of charged particles going across, you have a magnetic field, and that magnetic field will induce and cause more and more and more of them as they go down through all the wires in a system. So, and then,
it's possible. I'll posit that it's an amazingly inefficient way of doing things, given the angle that.
Well, we're using the Earth as an electron sink.
What Marconi / Tesla we're looking at, it's like it's a very talk about primitive. You're ultimately cutting off the potential of something that's just the scale just is jaw-droppingly different.
And you're not wrong when we are dealing with this kind of thing, as Dave suggested. That's a Carrington event that would have done something like that, and we barely noticed it. So what if as human beings on the planet, it didn't really screw us all up. But if that was just a Carrington event, it was able to screw up transmission lines and stuff, then imagine we go back further in time and there's something really big happening, like a planet whizzing by or something. Well, then suddenly with the interaction, you're going to have a large change of charge, but it's going to bleed from the planet or whatever. It's not going to just raise it up and then slowly discharge over time across the solar wind. It might actually transfer from one planet to the other, like two Van de Graaff generators, like shocking each other. Well, if that's what's happening, then suddenly the Earth loses, let's imagine, God knows how many coulombs of energy. What the heck would that do to everything?
Well, look at
instantly,
EMPs, the threat of that, which has been floating around for a long time since our Nagasaki.
It's a very similar effect,
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and he talks about the shock waves.
Yeah. Yeah, but that thing, I mean, what they can do ultimately, turn everything off, and all, you got 2 weeks, and welcome to the jungle,
Could I jump in a second?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. And Hawthorne was yelling and screaming because I couldn't get this done. So Bruce Abel
he got us back. Say like motherfucker, ba ba ba. It was
honest to was up there in the intelligence community. I thought the phone was off. I turned everything off. I even had it that nothing was on, and I threw the phone, and I got mad because we couldn't do what. But now Born here, he got us on his computer. So what you were talking about quite a while ago was the Great Pyramid, and it got around to electrical and all those other stuff. So let me just put a thought in here real quick. The Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, the Chaco Canyon, Teotihuacan, all those places are on what somebody names the Great Circles. And they are supposed to be all interconnected, and when they interconnect, that's a crossover. That's where all the major things were. So maybe at one point, I think what the biggest problem we have on this planet is we generate electricity, capacitors. We spend billions of dollars on capturing waterfalls and making them plants to create electricity. The Earth is electrical. So maybe in the olden days when they were using electricity, by the way, the original city of Heliopolis, the god that they worshiped his name was On, like on and off, on. So electric. What's that?
AHN? Whatever, it's fine. Go ahead. I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
No, A10 or something like that was a one god, but before that was on, just O-N. And I thought maybe that's where on-off comes from. Who knows? But if the Earth has those electrical grids, maybe they knew how to build with granite that has piezoelectricity and everything. And maybe the full circles
that's what I was talking about, yeah.
Right. So maybe those circles are creating a piezoelectricity, and granite can bring it down, and the weight on granite, like in the King's Chamber. I said this way before Chris Dunn, who I believe, he says in his last book, the two channels that go up out of the King's Chamber, which were supposedly air chambers, never reach the outside. They don't even go to the outside, which ain't polished. So they never made it to the outside. They're 6 inches squared. They go nowhere. You know what they were? They were antennas. And they induce things into the King's Chamber. But the weight of the granite blocks on the King's Chamber, I read a long time ago, would create so much piezoelectricity that it would be tremendous. Then if a guy in the 60s designed and patented the Pharaoh's pump, which uses all the configurations of the Grand Gallery and everything else, he said it creates a tremendous amount of hydraulic pressure that they could have used a crane arm to actually move the rocks back and forth by using the Pharaoh's pump, is what the name of the patent was. So if they took water from underneath of the Great Pyramid, and those things you had up before showed down underneath, there was a bottomless pit, which was a well, and that long chamber that just goes off into nowhere is sort of like a pump arm on a pneumatic pump. It was like a shaft pump. And the only thing that was there is water was probably put up into that, which creates a terrible amount of pneumatic pressure. And then with the piezoelectricity, I think that they could harness whatever. Yeah, I'm seeing what it is. I looked at those. I had that on my wall 25 years ago. But what Chris Dunn says, those little 6 foot or 6 inch chambers, they put, I think he said, zinc dioxide or something.
That's going into the Queen's chambers. Yeah, there's 2 shafts, one with a particular material and the other one.
They never made it out. They just go off and they're cut off sharp. But what he says is that they dropped, I think it was sulfur, titanium dioxide, zinc dioxide, I think it was, down one side, and then another chemical or some crap down the other side. And what that did, he says in his book, would create hydrogen, which they would use to burn and send microwaves up to the star Dracos in the north, which was the North Star at that time. Like radio waves, with microwaves, you could then catch it anywhere. I said that a long time ago. However, why would you need that? Because they know that the pyramid shape, even a little cardboard one, separates the atoms in a molecule of water. The hydrogen, oxygen, like it's a triangle. The triangle expands.
There it is,
bigger.
right there, actually.
Okay, so what they're saying is that what water, the pyramid actually makes water expand itself and makes it wetter. So therefore, it makes things grow better. Hence, you had the hanging gardens of Babylon, the floating gardens of Lexicon, and the fertile delta of where they grew the best cotton ever made. It was because all they did was take the water out of the earth, and then they separated if a pyramid will separate the molecule somewhat to make water wetter, and it's a little paper cardboard. The big one of stone and granite separated it completely. It disjoined the water and the hydrogen. They used the hydrogen because it came out. What went into the Nile in the causeway was actually a water that had a lot of oxygen in it or something, like a better water, because it had, and that discharge, instead of being a pollutant like fission, it was actually made things grow. So they got 3 vegetable crops a year off of Lake, whatever it is down there in Mexico, hydroponic gardening. And there was a well that came from the Pyramid of the Sun down through 7 pools into the Pyramid of the Moon, and then back into the lake. So I'm thinking all that they did was take the electrical properties of the earth and use them, however, like direct current electricity, which makes up a lot of things. The dolmens that they find out there, they don't know what they were. They say that a dolmen is like 2 rocks that stand up. One is higher than the other, and a tilted big rock on top, like 3 rocks usually. They say that was when the meteorites were banging the earth like crazy. They'd get under there and hide. Well, first of all, they had no walls. So if one hit 6 foot from you at that speed, it would disintegrate you anyways. And secondly, there's no pock marks in the top from being hit by them. I think what they were is you had a top piece, a bottom piece, and you put a heavy rock on top, and that weight caused a flow of piezoelectricity, and they hooked it up, and they were able to connect to it like you stick it into your computer today. I think they were little generators that were placed around the earth that they could use and hook into. You know, I think that they used the earth's electricity, and if we could get back to that, we could then take the electricity in the earth and not spend nickel one on producing energy. We could just use the earth because it's there.
We actually just convert energy. We don't actually produce it, but I know exactly what you mean. And there's...
Yeah, we produce much. It costs a lot to do that, no matter what they're doing.
True.
You've got to have a lot of money. So without that, you're just kind of hooking into it and using natural products like granite, which has piezoelectricity in. And if those things connect up, you can add that all the way into everything. Look like it's electrical from that nature. So that's what I think they did. They used as much electricity as we do and more prior to the Tower of Babel. I think that they knew a lot of stuff. They were able to transport themselves by planes and vimanas and little things. Who knows what they did? They took Ezekiel away and brought him back. He sat by the river for 6 days bewildered. So if they had that power like I've always said, we don't need to have Klingons come and teach us. They get their information the same as we do.
Well, here's the thing, though. This is what we just to add. This is what Dave had brought up. It says, if that is true, and it might have been true then, but it seems that we're losing power over time. So these things stopped working. It seems that they got less and less effective, perhaps. And they needed to try to update them, like the Khufu tried to dig it extra, maybe try to kickstart the pyramid or something. And there seems to be evidence for that. But I'm not sure. But it seems to
inject on that, Neil.
Sure.
I've been looking at the lightning data on the planet.
Yeah.
And you know, Catatumba down there in Venezuela, Lake Maracaibo.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, now if you go north and west, you get all those Mayan temples up in the Yucatan. And then if you look at the Congo, which is the most lightning in the planet, and you go north of the Congo, you see Egypt with all the pyramids. And if you go over there in Asia, right now it's North Australia. It's not a lot of lightning. But then you go northwest of there, and there's a bunch of pyramids. So it's like they were tapping the equatorial currents, and then the equator shifted.
That
we don't tap that anymore. We don't tap it anymore.
That could have been it. You might have nailed something right there. Like the Earth could have changed its orientation. But you're right that one of the things that we see, like when we're playing with the Tesla, not Teslas, the balls there, the Torellas that Birkeland had, and if you turn it up or turn it down, you could see the rings would go further towards the equator or away from it towards the poles. Now, I could envision something like that, too, like it's not directly on the equator, but it's above and below it. This is where we get Tornado Alley and Hurricane Alley and all this, Thunderstorm Alley type things, too. So, yeah, what you've just said speaks to me. I didn't even know that. That's amazing.
Okay. Old lightning places and new lightning places. Just look at the offset, and you can figure out where the old equator used to be, I think.
Well, and this, Edwin, that's your new task. Go use that Barrio Build Reps guy and see if we could figure out what these old, where they were built for, if that's what they were trying to do, because we would know, right? It's moving, the idea of it.
Right. We've been talking about that, indeed, from Barrio Build Reps, and, that's why I'm such a proponent of that theory, because it connects to so much out there. The moment you plug in my book, right, just personally, the moment you plug in the notion that the North Pole, the actual pole, the rotation point, actually can shift, all these things start to make sense. The orientation of those megaliths, the placement in the latitude, longitude. It makes sense to me.
I'm a little bit biased. I'm a little bit for and a little bit against, and I'll tell you why. My one bias is love the Velikovsky and Talbot thing, and that might throw it for a whack because it sort of makes it an oddity that only existed in the last, few thousand years, perhaps, as opposed to a culture that seems to extend to, 500,000 years. So that is something. But also the idea that human beings are older than we think that they are, or we adopted this technique of building from like Neanderthals, just blows my mind in a way. Like we're reaching into a past in a connection that I didn't see before.
True.
Or both are true. I know.
I'm not seeing that prediction that's easy. Go, Heather.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to put that word cyclical in there because everything seems like it's cyclical. And so maybe it wasn't such an abnormality. Maybe it was part of the natural cycle, like an extremely long cycle. So it was reoccurrent. So it wasn't just one, like 500,000 years ago that lasted this long. It was one then, and then one then.
Well, and we're only using he's only using the ice core data as a marker, the Barrio Build Reps. So we have to actually judge is that valid too? But it seems to be so.
Well, I agree with your point there, Neil. I mean, the chronology, if you will, of this ice core data is a magnitude larger, if you will, than for the stuff that Jane O'Cook or Julian West or the Saturn myth or etc.
I'm attracted to that too. I find that to be just fascinating. But it could be bullshit too. So
But if we look at the Mario website, we see that the pole has had at least 5 distinguishable positions. So that recurring effect, that cyclical effect that Heather brought up, I can totally see that happen. And being a reason for the recreation of everything, and you have to build new structures if you're out of phase, if you will, which Bruce brought up just now. So I can see the correlation there very strongly.
I just envision if we could match those the rings around the planet that are a little bit above and a little bit below the equator that he was referring to, and then match that to the movement of that pole. That would just be cool. I mean, it would just be another thing that sort of linked the two, is all I meant. But I don't know if that even holds true. It would not surprise me if it did.
Well, we can do that, I guess.
No, it's just an idea. I'd have to learn more about what Bruce is talking about, though. I think I understand that he's talking about the places where currently lightning strikes crap might have been just slightly off of where those pyramids were, and who knows why.
Well, Bruce, cool. Bruce, can you talk a little bit to why they should be there where they are, about the electric circuitry, if you will, that you're pointing to? Do we see structures in the inners of the Earth that we can refer to? Anything like that?
Let me think about that. What I've just been looking at is the distribution of lightning now, trying to figure out why it's distributed where it is. But then when I was looking at that, I just happened to notice that always to the northwest was a concentration of pyramids. And I thought, well, if we put the pyramids where the concentration of lightning is now, maybe we could tap it and blow ourselves up like they did.
Which would be a good thing.
I'm just saying.
I'm not ready for the rapture, young man.
It's just a speculative thing, but it's just kind of interesting that coincidentally the pyramids are north of the current lightning strike areas, which, it doesn't make sense that all of them would be north of it if there was a tilt in the equator, a true tilt. But
so that also adds to the thing that they say at one point there was a 360-day year and all that. And then on the electric universe, I find out that pterodactyls couldn't fly because they were too heavy. There must have been a time when the gravity was lighter. And then it says that with all this big stuff they're finding out, they're saying that there's much bigger animals and stuff that were there. So what if, and this was just a thought, I don't know, it probably is written, but what if the Earth went through stages of itself, like they say there was an old Earth and a new Earth and a lot of different ages and stuff. So maybe the Earth itself went through changes. What if at one point it wasn't 25,000 miles around, it was 150,000 miles in circumference, but the same mass that it is right now, which would mean it'd have to be more like a balloon. And then they're even saying that gravities, polarities are just at the surface, and that you wouldn't really go to the center with gravity. You'd go so far and then turn around and go back up to the top. Well, if that were the case, they're talking about hollow planets and hollow stuff. What if this big 150,000 mile route things would circle the sun a lot slower at that circumference than it did at the axis? Like a little tiny wheel that spins fast. But when you're way out there, you'd have a longer growing season.
You actually hit on something on that. What you're describing, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a good thought experiment, but how we measure the mass of a planet got us into this mess. This is one of the things that I find fascinating about the electric universe, the idea that these numbers are not these are not correct, basically. And this is, the dirty snowball comet idea that we were talking about earlier.
That was disproved. So I'm just saying, if it was really big and just the same mass it is now, it would be less dense, however the inside was. And then at that point, you'd have less gravity. But if you would take the same Earth and roll it in on itself like a scroll, and it says in those things I ain't allowed to talk about, like scriptures, that it rolled itself in as a scroll, which would be like taking a newspaper and just keep twisting it together until it was small enough to make the guy out with it.
If I may interject there, I think you're kind of pointing towards the same thing there. But if gravity, which is very poorly understood, let's point that out first, is indeed an electric effect, right, in an electric universe, then I find the question that Neil asked more feasible, if you will, instead of having an actual increase in mass or size or whatever, which is hard for me to digest as a proposal, but having a charge, on the whole Earth body, if you will, there's a change there. And if there's a true correlation, I don't know, but and it's also a what if, but if there's a true correlation there and we can find that one, my question becomes, does the electric charge affect the level of gravity? And so more like a bigger Earth, but in a charge sense, if you will, instead of a true mass.
Yeah.
Well, actually, and we know that actually happens on Earth in the sense that, for example, in parts of Canada have less gravity than anywhere else on the planet. No one has a clue why. It's obviously there's not a giant pit underneath Canada. So, what does this mean? Why is it there? That's very interesting.
Right.
Yeah. So I just was thinking if it was really big, like rolled in, like I think they call it a Z-pinch. It would just like it would stamp this thing in around itself, so you'd have a lot of different layers, but a tighter mass of the same weight and everything, and so you'd have more gravity and a quicker rotation and a shorter growing period. All those things could work, but I don't know because I just read stuff.
Hey, Robert.
Well, those could all be in a correlating or an effect of a bigger charge, for example, on the Earth system, right? Or a bigger current going through it, through a Birkeland current. I don't know.
It makes a bigger torus or a tighter torus. I honestly don't know either.
Yes, that's what I'm referring to.
Because one of the things that we simply do not know what's going to happen. Like one time, we watched this little comet travel out away from the Earth after it went around the sun there. And this was only about maybe 10 years ago. And then this thing went by Jupiter. Now it hit Jupiter's plasmasphere, and when it did, or at least got close to it, I'm not sure exactly how close, but the thing just ballooned up to this one little comet, was giving a coma, a tail, around it, the size of Jupiter's magnetosphere. So this thing is just a huge friggin' ball suddenly going. Now, what caused that? Did it change environment and suddenly there's electrical pressure change? Is it because it discharged to Saturn or to Jupiter? We don't know. But this is all this. It just shows. I mean, that should not happen. Snow should not, if it's in the conventional theory, snow should not suddenly puff out around their space rock, their comet, and then that makes no sense in the conventional theory. It makes some sense in electrical theory, but it just shows how much we don't know. Did it get hit by a CME as it went by? What happened there? And we knew something did happen.
Did it have something to do with its charge? Obviously, like how big of a what is its charge differential? But also, this leads to greater questions about how comets affecting Jupiter have a direct effect on the sun and therefore direct effect on us.
Good call.
Even like right now, currently, because I've been asking this question about 67P because I've been noticing correlations when it said it's jovahelion as opposed to when it said it's aphelion and how that affects us. And so we had over some cycles, there are definitely some geologic events, occurrences, weather things that happen when 67P is over by Jupiter. So why does that happen?
That graphic is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Man, I saw that current go right up that ancient fault. That
right,
goes
you start seeing. Yeah, you start seeing these just clear, Lichtenberg patterns, and then the angular, stuff.
That's literally the path I drove across the country right there.
There you go.
And you know what?
Is that what happened when you drove across?
I caused the lightning. I'm sure.
You caused the lightning.
Yeah, it knew it was coming. Yeah.
Where that lightning is that not the most intense downpouring of rain?
Honestly, I don't know. But wow, look at that.
You guys just had a couple of topics that are making me think of the weird stuff I'm doing in my garage right now. I sent over some images of discharging from a wet clay ball to a neodymium ring magnet, and it created that little yin-yang, half a yin-yang shape of condensation, only on one side. And then I think that was Robert Sr. was talking about, the Earth being a different size, which I'm a proponent of an expanding Earth theory. In playing with these clay balls...
Generally speaking, I am too.
Okay, cool. So the clay balls, I noticed that when they're wet, it's very conductive, obviously. As soon as it starts to dry out and that electricity hunts for the moisture, as soon as that moisture is gone, it's no longer conductive. So we look at planets like Mars, how, it's much smaller than ours, but there's no water. It's part,
That is a really good correlation you make there. I pointed that out in the EU in England this year, that the planets that show geological activity, kind of like Earth, there is always water involved. Mm-hmm. So basically all the dry planets, moons and whatnot, they don't have water, therefore they don't have the geology as the Earth does. Now the Earth is the water planet per sun, right? And we have this geology. There's a direct correlation between volcanism, geology, electricity, currents, etc. And all these things are intimately connected somehow.
Remember, of course, that the Earth is basically everywhere that land is basically like an insulative layer of several meters of dry stuff that you can't get through. And electricity would love to get through it. So it goes to the high points like the mountains and so forth, where you can see them sort of form near mountains and whatever. But as it begins to soak the land, you're going to be able to get an induced current right across the entire country, or you get to see and we noticed it likes to go on the edges of things, just like it does on wood, where it wants too wet. No, but just perfect, because, pure water is an insulator too. And even large amounts of salt water will cause it to, it'll go across the surface as opposed to rake down. I mean, so I can picture it like seeing, hey, I see there's larger potential over here. I want to try to get through you. As the water soaks in, it's like, okay, now you're giving me conduit and I can start discharging better. And that's what it appears to be anyway. It could be wrong, of course.
I should try taking one of those balls and then soaking it in water and then trying to run a current through it to see. That goes back to, I'm trying to ask you guys what kind of experiment you think on a small scale would help.
Is there a way that you can you can film? Watch me put together exotic experiments. Sorry about that, but it's like if you could film it and then have it against what the current is, that would be really interesting.
So like a live measurement.
If you could do a sampling of the current, that's happening. Say I don't know what the sample rate you could you do a it's just analog to digital conversion on it at some
if I could throw in a suggestion there too,
it'd be pretty cool.
Go ahead.
Sorry, but not that you have unlimited funds for doing research with.
You can just buy a kilowatt meter.
These are actually things we'd like to start doing. Why not? Why not start playing with this stuff? And do them a little more formally. A giant laser. Yeah.
Well, if you want to do that, just to make it real easy, if you ever do want to do that, you can buy a kilowatt meter that you plug into a power plug and just put a camera facing it, like a cell phone facing it, and then you could get it will detect the amount of current that's going through. Now you'd have to do the conversion, but the power will be the same on either end because power is power. So the amount of power that you're putting through will be the same power that you're drawing. It can't be different. Unless, so.
Is that the same thing that it's got a loop around it that you could put around a cable to measure?
No, that's a Hall effect meter or a loop meter, but no, this is something you just plug into the wall and it has a screen on it. And it'll tell you, you have 115 volts and you're burning 0 watts and no amps. But then you plug something into it like a light bulb and it will start telling you exactly how much you're drawing through that plug. And so you could do that while you're burning things and it will, because there's no, I mean, the amount of power that you're using across your arc should be the same that you're drawing from the wall, unless something magical's happening. So look at those numbers, and you could film those with another cell phone or something, and then film with the camera, and you could see any variations as you fry things. You know, just an idea.
That's a great idea.
I got a good idea. So, Dave, I think you might have the same setup as me, with the transformer there. So we could get some of those bugs. What are those bugs that live in space?
Tardigrades.
So we could get some tardigrades. They're everywhere.
I love how it's just like that. Just like
they're underneath bark.
My brain's full of crap like that.
So my thoughts immediately went to extremophiles and what type of creatures could live under these types of conditions. And there are tardigrades all over, but I'm trying to think of something else like a bacteria or a fungus that might actually propagate or live in these circumstances.
Plankton?
Plankton.
Yeah, but remember of that, what was it, that Twilight Zone episode, or the other, what was it called? Other, something like that. One of those type of shows, if not Twilight Zone.
Outer Limits.
Outer Limits. Thank you. And it had all the like bridges there, Bo Bridges and Jeff Bridges and all the bridges, and they're all in this one episode where they've got these plants from these animals from Mars, and then they start forming society inside of the thing. So don't electrify them too much, or they might become intelligent and attack you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Play the gray goo kind of thing.
I love that episode. It blows my mind every time I thought about it.
I was thinking of if I could just grow an ant farm and then put a vacuum in there with some plasma and see what kind of gases, if they would survive.
Oh, they'll hate you. It's like, what is this guy doing? My ears are popping.
It's funny. It's like you go back. What's happening is a visitation of childhood when you get the magnifying glass and you chase the ants with the magnifying glasses. It's like this is actually happening for me. Actually.
Well, here in Texas we have fire ants, and they're not our friends.
Yeah, no, they aren't. Where are you at in Texas?
In the Dallas area.
Okay. I worked in Austin for a while. So.
Oh, yeah. I was down there for about 7 years. That was a good place.
Oh, nice. Yeah, pretty fun.
Overrated, but it's great.
Yeah.
Did somebody put up a picture of a praying mantis? I'm kind of getting sick.
You're getting sick. Oh, you're not into the tardigrade? Praying mantis is going to help?
They just look like... Who did that?
Oh, these things? Yeah, they're pretty wild. Tardigrade. Yeah.
Whoever designed that's a hell of a.
They are the supreme survivors. They can restore DNA and all that.
Right.
But they're the originators of the grizzly bear.
That's what they say, right? See, that's how they kind of caricaturize the rhino.
And the rhino. Okay.
The first unicorns. Yeah.
Like a mud fossil.
It's like Dune, though. It's like the worms from Dune.
Well, I think
Shai Hulud.
Kindergarten show right now. I think.
Is that a mouth or a nose or their?
Let's just not talk about what it is.
It's a laser.
Yes. It's all those.
It's a proboscis.
I've had to deal with them for way too long because that Star Trek Discovery had a tardigrade in it, and I was like, what? They got sued over that, you know. They stole that from a game called Tardigrades, and the guy who made the game was like, I'm going to sue your freaking ass for this. So, right. And then they had to write it off the show and everything.
So
that's a good price.
There
is living things
that's terrible. Look at
he's dancing.
That's
fabulous.
Flamenco praying mantis.
Yes.
Yeah.
I try not to judge. They have their own mating patterns, man. I mean,
this is the last image you normally see of that creature. It'll eat you.
Actually, it eats. Doesn't it eat its? Like,
they have this. Look at the pattern on that.
That is pretty cool.
They do that.
They try to attract a mate in order for the mate to come and bite their head off,
and then eat them.
Yeah. That seems.
This is very interesting. I mean,
they should rethink. If I was a praying mantis, I would be gay. I'm just saying.
Unfortunately,
no praying mantis for me.
I reference to that metaphor. Unfortunately.
Well, come on. I'm going to have sex once and die? No, in fact, I'll be celibate. I don't even need to be into this. Okay, I'm just gonna read books or something. I'm gonna be a praying mantis who likes fast cars. Okay,
no offspring for Neil there.
Nope. It's safer that way.
Can I steer us back on topic for just a second here?
We had a topic.
Sure. We were getting radically frivolous there.
So life.
It's about that time.
If there is creatures that can survive in these types of environments, extremophiles or plants or funguses, we can look to conifers because conifers are the oldest living plants, oldest living things on the planet, and they exist in very extreme conditions all across the planet here. So it might be a good idea to actually take a pine cone and electrocute a pine cone and see if how the interaction might happen. It might go to the tips and spiral up. That might be kind of cool. But it's got me.
It's always been a fascinating one, particularly with the Fibonacci stuff and the stuff that you look at with the Doherty set. This one element that we're so familiar with. You know, and how it's geometrically structured.
That seems to be one of the evidence that this type of tree and its hardiness seems to be evidence that of a time prior to us orbiting the Earth or orbiting the Sun. The reason that is a callback all the way, according to the John Cook and others in the Saturnian model, is that if you go back far enough, there were no flowering plants, and these plants were the only plants around. They are extremely hardy. They repel water like there's nobody's business, and those things take 3 or 4 years to open up. You know, they take that long to dry out before they'll open up.
They open and close and open and close and open and close for years, and then they finally fall.
And a lot of them fire. A lot of them also need fire to germinate.
True. Yeah,
and that
which I always thought was interesting because they were. Well, I always thought it was interesting that they were shaped that way because they're shaped like a flame, you know, like that conical shape, and they need that to propagate.
It's just an interesting thing about that at some point in time, all the plants, like if we go to dinosaur age, okay, we'll say, all the plants and stuff like that are extremely hardy. They are made to deal with extremely wet environments. So an environment of constant rain where the sky is purple, there's a uniform glow everywhere, that sort of purple dawn aspect way back when, though. And then it seems that we start getting flowering plants for a certain period of time. And then it seems that that's why there's this idea that then perhaps maybe we got caught up in something again for a short period of time that caused, the golden age and a few other things in there. But and then, of course, the catastrophes thereafter. But this is all supposition. You see how hard it is because you have to deal with stories plus there's literal evidence here. I mean, they might not have the time frames right. It might not be 65 million years ago, but it might be some friggin' long time ago, if you know what I mean. And there is some correlation because we notice that we can tell when the Roman Empire happened in the ice cores. We know that it happened here because that's the pollutants we see. So there has to be some sort of correlation between this, but does it go further out of whack the farther back in time we go? And me and Bruce have had that conversation, is how much do we know about geology? And I mean, we know quite a bit, and we can't go against these certain things that we do know. But we also realize that because we saw that thing with the idea of stratification, that little video on stratification, seeing where oh, well, something can fall here, but be at a deeper level than the thing here, you know, and that's interesting. We just don't think of it that way. So,
when I'm sending high voltage electricity through pine, it behaves completely different than any other wood that I work with. It creates some of the most erratic patterns and shapes. They look very much like the ancient scripts that we were talking about, and plasmoids in the air.
mm-hmm.
And it's a lot more elaborate and intricate when you're sending electricity through through pine. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. I'll have to throw some images on here.
Cool.
Buddy, what's your power supply source running?
Initially, I had a couple of microwaves, but I worked those so much that they just kind of deteriorated, and now I'm just working with the same thing you got, pretty much. Yeah, which takes a long time. It's a lot better with a microwave transformer.
Yeah.
To do a whole like kitchen table or a dresser takes a lot longer. It's kind of a pain in the butt. So I got to get my other ones operating.
Okay.
That's also weird too, that conifers are softwoods almost entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And the other trees are hardwoods. Yeah, it's just interesting. Maybe that's why I was just thinking about his
cycle. There's a growth cycle to ecology, like when plants are going to take over. So it starts with like little grasses, and then it moves on to herbaceous.
We lost you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me
Okay,
now?
sorry.
Yeah,
I was stepping outside. Sorry, you caught me in my loop. My vortex was full there.
Much
Okay,
better,
but it goes from grasses to herbaceous annuals to herbaceous perennials to woody perennials to shrubs to evergreen, and then to deciduous trees. So that tells you how long, like if there has to be some kind of land reclamation where, say, like there was a big building site and that was torn down and they replaced it with like just fill dirt, right? And then they left it alone on the side of the road. That would be the cycle that it would go through. When you started to see big, huge trees, it would have gone through all of those cycles to get to the point where it could support the root systems and needs of the large deciduous tree.
Also, getting into some of those, I still haven't got to see the incredibly huge trees of California. I don't know if there's even any left. But,
right?
Yeah, there are.
There are? Okay.
Yeah, they stopped deforesting.
Well, that's probably
the
good.
fires were an issue.
Right.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I meant like those old timey 1900s photos where they took the big saws to the giant trees, and you're like, I want to see some of those.
The ones you could drive through.
When I lived up there, Mendocino County had sold all of their redwoods, so you could still find like feature redwoods in small patches and places, but all of the large growth, old growth forests had been sold. But up in Humboldt County, where like Eureka, Arcata, the Avenue of the Giants is up there, there's still large stretches of redwood forests that go on and on and on. But they're only like, there's like a line you can see, like if you're flying over it, you can see the line basically in the sand where Mendo's yellow and Humboldt's green.
Well, it's just weird because some of those trees almost belie a time of lower gravity, but they've managed to live through it. It's almost. It's clear that the amount of tree that can be supported, it has a limit depending on apparently you have to be able to get nutrients all the way up there, right? So, or water up there and then nutrients, through the sun back down, or however the heartbeat works. And
I just had another weird thought. Also, when I'm fractal branding, and I have the electricity running, and a fly comes and lands on the table, or it's already on there and I turn it on, it'll freeze and it won't do anything. And then I'll turn it off and it'll fly away. So there's currents that clearly aren't going to hurt or kill a lot of different creatures on different levels. But just thinking about, life and plasma and, extremophiles, just because it survives it doesn't mean it's an extremophile in my book, I guess. But what classifies an extremophile, I'm really curious about fungus, because there's like 80% of all of the fungus in the world still hasn't been charted or even explored.
I was going to suggest that to Dave, but at the same time, I realized that you start electrifying things like our spores and stuff. They respond really well to lightning. So, I can just imagine him like hitting a bunch of spores and it goes blah, and just turns into this thing like Akira and starts coming out of the jar, and he has to run out of the building.
Well, it's interesting. It makes me want to. I've made popcorn before, but I've never electrocuted it.
That would be funny, actually. Could you imagine you're doing your experiment? It goes, now here's a really cool experiment. You see, everything in this is popcorn. I'm going to pour the butter on.
Okay,
now we're going to start shooting lightning through it.
Because that might go viral. Let's do it.
It's a variation on that with plasma. Really.
I'm doing pumpkin cake next.
Hey, a couple of you EE guys in here. So I haven't not been working with a vacuum, but I want to. Any suggestions on equipment? I don't know if you even have that.
Oh man, exploration of those ancient tubes. I mean, they're also like steampunk too. I mean, I think that's the. At least, I'm not by any means an expert, but like my antenna are up on them, and what were they doing? What was RCA doing, et cetera, all those, and then prior with the
I think he's talking vacuum pumps, not vacuum tubes.
Well,
okay.
I'm messing around with vacuum tubes, but which I have dealing with guitar amps before, but I am talking about being able to make my own.
Oh, to make a vacuum in a
enclosed vacuum environment,
right?
Like Jacob's got going.
Honestly, I honestly don't know very much about vacuum tubes. However, I do know the most important thing would be the structure of the container you're trying to lower the pressure in.
Yeah.
Because obviously you don't want, a giant round glass container, not too giant, but like a giant, one of those 18-liter jugs that you would put water in, that you put on top of one of those water filter machines that you get the little paper cups out of, those type size, but they come in glass. That would probably be the largest you could probably do. And even then you'd have to, be careful when you're lowering the pressure, because I don't know because it could only take so much air pressure on every corner, but being round is much better than than trying to do it inside of a flat, say an aquarium, for example. You could only do a low pressure. A low pressure would have to be very low, because too much pressure and you're going to pop those windows, right? So.
Yeah, that reminds me of Birkeland's Torella. It's like an aquarium.
Yeah,
almost.
So, but you can see he's doing it. So, but I don't know how thick that glass is, though. It could be like, I ordered this glass special from, wherever, because he was a scientist,
it's a bell jar. Right, but they're bell jars.
Right
so
there.
if you wanted, if you wanted to search bell jar, then maybe that find something durable that's made to withstand more.
Well, just the roundness of it would be better.
Like a terrarium glass, you know what I mean? Because when you said that, when you started talking about it, I kept thinking about those sailboats that you build in the jar, and then they pull that thing and pop up a sailboat in a bottle. Like, I wonder how big you could get one of those.
I do know that you need 6 inches of plexiglass to withstand the pressure to hold 2 whales inside of a, Romulan warbird. So,
okay.
Star Trek 4,
I see.
If you can even see it.
But only 1 inch if it's transparent aluminum. Scotty told me all about this. Never mind.
Beam me up, Scotty.